Welcome to an episode of Innovation Spotlight. That's a special episode coming to you from South by Southwest EDU. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance. Today, I'm live in Austin, Texas, and I'm preparing for what will later be my speech at South by. And I always try and make it so that whenever I'm sharing innovation insights from the field, that I share it with our audience first. So I wanted to make sure to do that in this case. And so this will be a quick episode to provide you with a little bit of the context that I'll be sharing later this week. The first is I get a lot of requests from people about what is it that is the secret sauce when it comes to innovation. And, there's all this hype and energy and marketing around innovation, but for people who are just on the ground wanting to do a better job and wanting to feel like they have the tools they need to be able to improve their work, their life, the experience of students, I feel like we glamorize it too much and we don't get down to the nuts and bolts of exactly what it is. So that's what I want to do, is try and share the simple stuff about innovation. So the first thing I want to do is share that, I think that innovation is a whole lot simpler than people realize. That if I were to give you a North Star on whether or not you have an innovative culture or not and what to aspire to, for me, it's more shots on goal. Very simple. When you think about hockey, when you think about, frankly, soccer, anything, it is not about the person who is the best. It is about the person who keeps going and who keeps trying and iterating and riffing and keeps trying a different angle. That is, when I go to a place that is able to achieve innovative results, it really is that there is an underlying culture where there is less fear of failure, that people have created an environment where it's safe to iterate, to test, to try small experiments. They lower the cost of failure by enabling more kind of micro experiments. You get to kind of microdose innovation. And what that does is it makes it so that people try more things and they, as a result, find more solutions. And that's it. So when you want to think about the things to focus on, think about the things that make it so you're likely to take more shots, that your people are likely to take more shots, that they are willing to test and try and iterate. And I think that for me, there's just some really basic stuff around how to cultivate that culture of taking more shots. And when I zoom back and I think about innovation, when I come into a place, to a new campus, and I'm trying to understand like what's going on here, why are or aren't they able to achieve what they're trying to do? It really is much more basic than people realize, because at the end of the day, innovation and change happens to humans. It is involving humans, and humans. You understand humans. They are very simple. They're simple but complex, but humans are motivated to avoid pain and pursue pleasure. And those two things are subjective. But generally speaking, if you want to understand how to make change and innovation feel better, you have to understand that the reasons people resist it is because there is pain associated with it. Because often anyone who says that they love change and innovation is a liar, because you only like the change or the innovation that was your idea. You only like the change that you like. And people are not bad people for not liking change. They are not less innovative. There's all kinds of things I don't want you to change about the app that I use whenever I check into the hotel the chain that I usually use. You change that, I'm lost all of a sudden. I mean, think about the time that you went from a Hotmail account to Yahoo or Google. If you went to Gmail account, yes, the technology might be better, but at the first time you try something new, it is awkward and weird and it feels uncomfortable, right? And so the idea that you want to advance change and innovation in your culture, you need to first understand that these are human beings. They're going to be involved. And so you should really think about the experience and the on-ramp of the innovation or change. And that, oftentimes when we're thinking in universities about innovation and change, we don't recognize that the most fundamental value system that we're swimming in is one of scarcity. that there's not enough money, that there's not enough students, there's not enough attention, there's not enough time, just generally not enough. And what that does is it forces people to contract, to protect what they have. And when I go places, what I pick up on is that often people in leadership are misreading that the people who work for them, who they are seeing as resistant to change, are just worried about feeding their families. These are very reasonable concerns. Like, they're worried about losing their jobs. They're worried that, I've worked for 10 years to try and finally someday get, a cubicle with a view to a window, and you're going to change everything now. All my progress will be lost. I think that if you want to lead change and innovation, you have to have care for humans, and you have to lead with curiosity instead of judgment, like Ted Lasso says. And you have to, at the very base level, what is the pain these people are trying to avoid? What is what feels good to them? What do they like? What kinds of things do they pursue? I mean, people do all kinds of weird stuff for rankings. People do all kinds of weird stuff for awards. People do things for access to travel resources. People do, they're willing to go above and beyond for all kinds of reasons. It's your job as a leader to understand what those reasons are and to ensure that the experience of change and innovation on your campus taps into those underlying desires. So what I most frequently see is that people are yearning for three things that I always talk about that are missing because you couldn't get them on Zoom during COVID, and that's community, inspiration, and purpose. And so when I think about building innovation and change experiences, I focus on those things, on how do you make it so that the experience of innovation actually gives someone access to community? How do you make it so that they get access to being reminded that they have more power than they realize? And how do you get them access to their sense of purpose, which often is about serving students? There have been a lot of really creative institutions that realize that the administrators who are responsible day to day for running an institution rarely get a chance to work with students. They rarely get a chance to interact with them. And so they will often, I've seen many times different types of internship experiences where they bring students to actually work and get mentored by folks who often are in the back, right? Whether it's accounting or otherwise. And it's, it helps the student, but it helps the person who's, might have been perceived as resistant to change, because what they're experiencing is reinvigoration and a reminder about why they do what they do. And oftentimes that's about students, or, who knows what it is. But I would just say you cannot lead people if you don't care about them, and you cannot lead change if you don't recognize that at the very base level, you're trying to get human beings to change how they experience the world or how they do things. And pain and pleasure. It's that simple. I hate to, it is that simple. So the third piece I would share about driving change and innovation that, for me just feels simple, but yet gets hard for folks is, that was my slide about pain and pleasure. That's pain and pleasure. By the way, when I looked up on Canva to try and make a slide about pleasure, it showed a speedboat. I was like, I mean, do they know us or not? So I want to give an example of the, the next piece, which is around systems. Like, you have to always see that whatever you're dealing with at its very base level, the real innovators are systems thinkers. They are people who level up and who recognize that people aren't doing, the way that, the system is perfectly designed to get the results it does, right? Well, you have to at some point recognize that people are, again, doing things. The system is perfectly set up. The tenure structure, the reward system that exists in higher ed, the ecosystem that we exist in, the competitive environment, all of it can explain all the behavior that you see. And if you want to change the system, if you want to change what's going on, you're going to have to see the system for how it is. But I just taught a class on systems thinking, and the best example I would give for you is, when you see a problem, if the problem is right here, very close to your face, and you don't zoom out, you're going to often have the laziest interpretation of what the problem is. You will often assume people are lazy. It's because they don't care, because they don't want to work hard. It's because of blah, 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 blah. Really ungenerous assumptions is what I see when people are not changing the altitude by which they look at the problem. And that's what I would describe systems thinking is. You literally are leveling up and you were zooming out, you were zooming up to try and see, okay, well, the reason that happens is because that, the way that in the past, the way you get resources and opportunity is because what they see and hear. Their boss does this. It's because they live in an ecosystem that's like this. I mean, I would just suggest that you have to see things from the broader view. And an example of that we always talk about is that higher ed was never designed around students. We are often misinterpreting that universities are a hostile space, that they are unwelcoming to students, or that, because things aren't perfect and seamless for students, that, well, we can either blame the student or we can blame the system. And I'd rather blame the system. And a good example of that, of how it's not designed around students, is graduation, which at every institution that I've gone to, and by the way, I've been talking about this now for a decade, I still haven't seen any alternatives. When it's time for a student to graduate, we don't know at the institution level. The student has to tell us. And when the student tells us, our response is to give them forms and paperwork, and finally to let them pay a fee. Now, when you're trying to check out your card at Amazon, if that was your experience, that you had to pay for the privilege to exit your cart, you get the very clear message that they don't really want you to do that. That is a clear example of what user-centered design looks like. And I would say a systems thinker should be looking for those things. You should be looking for the customer experience to be as frankly filled with ease as possible and seamless as possible. So I'm kind of conflating two topics right there with systems thinking and just the idea that, design centering the wrong, not centering the user leads to bad design. But I hope you get the point. But again, it would just be the essential point is that a systems thinker is an innovator, and you want to be able to see the system for how it is, not your fantasy of how it is, but actually how it really is for anyone you try and help. And if you want to drive innovation, it gives you a more generous assumption. It helps you see why things are happening the way they are, because again, change is about humans, and it's about at the end of the day, pain and pleasure, their motivations. It's also totally understandable based on systems. The third piece I wanted to give you today about innovation is really that when I go from campus to campus, I'm trying to understand what is going on and whether or not, often people are asking me, like, how do I encourage more innovation on my campus? And it always, to me, comes down to story, that there is always a story on a campus that you can pick up really quickly, and they don't often recognize it, but when you point it out, they can see it. And the stories are all the same. They're things like, we're too unionized. We tried that before. We could never do that. The faculty wouldn't like it. There's some oldies but goodies. We don't have enough money, whatever it is. Whatever the story is, if it goes unquestioned and unchecked, it maintains its power, and it's self-fulfilling. But I have seen places where the story is empowering and is actually productive. And I've seen examples where the story is really dangerous. I showed earlier a picture of Kodak. Now, Kodak is a company that was preeminent in the film processing space, and in fact developed the first digital camera in the 1970s, but they didn't release it because that wasn't what they were doing. They saw that their story was they are about film. That's their business model. They print photos. That's their thing. And it's not lost on many when they think about innovation that Instagram sold for over $1 billion on the same day that Kodak went bankrupt, because they refused to question their story they were telling themselves about what their value was. And they also refused to change their business model. And I think about Kodak all the time when I think about higher ed, because we really do have to adapt and evolve our business model. And that is a great cautionary tale for us. But for me, it's also a great example of story. I would give you two empowering examples of a story that I see as quite productive. The first is pretty famous, and that is Georgia State. People know that they eliminated race and income as a predictor of outcome, which is like pretty much the hardest thing that existed in higher ed, because so few, well, they're the only ones who'd done it, by not changing who they admitted. And the underlying story they had to tell themselves in order to make that possible was, what if we're the problem? That's it. They just, when they see a problem happen with students, they assume it's not the student. It's actually, what if our systems aren't set up? What if we are over communicating, under communicating? What if it's us? It turns out that creates a sense of social safety for people to question your existing systems and process. It also makes it okay for you to talk about failure and to think, and where you de-escalate the tension around and the fear around failure, because what if we're the problem is your narrative, well, then I guess you can admit that you might be the problem, and it's not so scary or dangerous. And in fact, you can probably raise your hand and point things out that are a source of failure. I think that's a really powerful one. And I also think that ASU, the story that I picked up on their campus, that only until a few weeks ago did I share this in front of their president and provost. I don't know that they knew this was their story, but the story at ASU, the reason why they are most innovative university in the country for the last decade, is that just figure it out. I just kept picking, whenever I went around campus and I would hear people talk about how they did things or why things happened, every single time they use that phrase, well, I just got to figure it out. I had someone say, who'd worked at multiple other universities and was a dean, that she'd never had she'd never been anywhere where it had been like at ASU. And she said that no one who she works for, when she's brought a new idea, at no point have they ever said no. She's like, I just have to figure it out. And again, I just keep hearing, figure it out, figure it out, figure it out. And it is a very empowering thing, because it makes it so that people don't expect perfection. Frankly, you are okay with a little bit of duct tape the first time you go around on an innovation. That aversion to perfection and that comfort with iteration and prototyping and beta testing, it makes it so it's a place where, again, you're going to take more shots on goal. And in the end, I think that that's an incredibly empowering story. But in general, whatever the story is on your campus, you should create space to talk about it. And when you hear it, you got to call it out and just, hey, oh, we're using that old story again. It doesn't eliminate it, but it makes you aware that you are letting a trope like be believable. You're believing that it's true. You're acting like it's true, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and people act as if. So the last piece I would share today about what really helps with the culture of innovation, from my perspective, is it's a belief in empathy. It is a underlying desire to, as I would describe, microdosing empathy is what I would suggest for people. The places that innovate have a very consistent diet where they focus on going out and surfacing insights from the audience they're trying to serve. They go and listen, and they are obsessed with applying curiosity to try and hear directly from their students, from their staff, from the people they're trying to serve. And what you need to do is look for environments where people, again, microdose it, where they make it so that it's a regular thing, where you come into the meeting and everyone's expected to have talked to 2 students that week. And we're going to have the first 15 minutes where we're going to actually share insights from what we're hearing. What you do is you make it so that you're turning your face towards your audience that you're trying to serve. You apply curiosity as a community that makes it more likely for people to feel safe to, again, take a shot in terms of putting a shot on goal, which is to, hey, maybe we should stop doing X, or I keep hearing this about students and they're having a hard time with registering for classes because we've narrowed the window that you're allowed. Maybe we could extend it. You basically make it so that in a group environment, you are applying curiosity in real time. And it's a super powerful and empowering strategy that I highly recommend. So these are just a few things that I would suggest when you're thinking about building a culture of innovation. Is, you want to create an environment where the culture underlying it all that is going to lead to people taking more shots. You want people to try more things. You want it to be okay when they make mistakes to actually apply curiosity to try and understand it so you get better and you iterate. You want people who are like actually curious about the people you're trying to serve and understand that at the end of the day, it's just people that you're working with. And so you need to make the experience of change a positive one, not one that is forced on them. You also want to, be a systems thinker, see the system for how it is, not for what you tell yourself it is. And I also think that it's really powerful to question the story that you're telling yourself and apply empathy. I would end with the example of Roger Bannister. This came from the Institute for Innovation in Higher Ed, or Innovation in Large Organizations. The example, which is, back until 1954, people really believed firmly that a 4-minute mile was impossible. It was just literally not going to happen. They, for more than 100 years have been trying to do it. And Roger Bannister just decides that that's possible. Like he decides to change the story in his head and makes it so that, he does the work and he gets there. And so May in 1954, he runs a 4-minute mile, a sub 4-minute mile. Well, by July 1954, someone else had already done that. And then by August as well, 2 more people. So nothing had changed about human beings and their bodies. But there was now a story that was widely believed about what was possible and whether or not a 4-minute mile was something that people could achieve. You have to create experiences that elevate a better story, a better narrative that you want to live in that world, but also just understand that a story is incredibly powerful. And don't let yourself buy into the story of your campus, of who you are that's defined in the past. Don't be Kodak. Like, we're going to have to evolve and adapt what we do. We need to think twice about the students we serve. We need to think about, adult learners. We need to think about students who are the comebackers, the students who walked away and never completed. We have to start reimagining who we might be. You might not be an institution that provides online learning. You might not be an institution that partners with community colleges, but that's who you were. And you have to give yourself space to be something new. If you want to be part of building a compelling world for students in the future, you're going to need to question the story, to see the system for how it is, to be a systems thinker, and to, lead with curiosity. So these are just some tips I would offer you. I would humbly submit in the hopes that they serve you as you think about ways to incentivize and encourage more innovation and change on your campus. So I hope this has been helpful. And going forward, we're looking for additional questions that come from folks about things they would like us to share about. And as always, our DMs are open, and also our website. So thanks again, Bridget Burns from the University Innovation Alliance. Thanks for coming to Innovating Together.